Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to foot.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Greetings, everyone. A pleasant good morning, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, here with Russell Dobular.
Hola, mi amigos.
Hola, hola, hola. Our second 9 a.m. Friday morning stream. Thank you guys all very much for being here. 134 strong in the YouTube chat. We got a nice little crowd gathering over on Rumble. 42 of you right now. Please hit that like button. We need the algorithm's help this morning. We're getting these morning streams started. If we want them to do well, we need to juice that algo. So it's extra important in the morning that you hit that like button. Wake everybody up.
Not that we're advocating that you juice.
Right, exactly. Just the algorithm. Just the algorithm.
Just the algorithm. Be
Just
like Hugh
algo.
Jackman.
Exactly.
Just white meat chicken.
White meat chicken, baby.
That's
Hit that like button.
And I stumbled to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition.
There we go. Got to hit that alarm clock. Hit that button. Wake everybody up out there. What are they doing? They should be up watching Do Dissidents. What the hell are they doing? What are they sleeping? What are they working? What are they driving? What are they making breakfast? Coffee?
What do you got a job?
Yeah. What do you have to do that's better than being here with us? So thank you. Now we're starting to get a crowd filing in here. Smash that like button. Really helps us out.
Us progressives have not fought this hard for a welfare state, so you can get up in the morning and go to work.
Right, exactly. Yeah. What do you think the whole point of this is?
Fuck.
Exactly. We wasted our time. Here. We have a full show to get to today. We have a very special guest who we're going to welcome in just a moment. But before that, Russell wants to start every show with a book recommendation that relates to the subject matter of the day's programming. So today, what do you got?
All right. So later on, we are going to be talking about the collapse of the American theater. Literally, the theaters are closing down, collapsing, canceling programs, even the big ones. We will get into that. We'll get into some of why that's happening. But Joseph Papp, who founded the Public Theater, if you don't know him, if you're not a theater person, he's kind of a legend in the American theater. He's the one who started Shakespeare in the Park. And his animating vision for Shakespeare in the Park, because he grew up working class, was to bring Shakespeare to the working class out of the theaters and make it accessible to everybody. So now to this day, Shakespeare in the Park is free, and that's the reason. Now, I will later on share my personal observations of why it didn't quite work, because now what you have is free Shakespeare that only the kinds of people that would go see it anyway go to. You don't have the people coming out from Queens and Brooklyn, which is really what he wanted, to go see Shakespeare, except for the hipster parts of Brooklyn. But that was his vision. So credit to him. And if you want to read something about that, if you're interested enough, this is a good book on the subject. Joe Papp and American Life.
Yes, it's a fascinating story. I read a book on Joe Papp as well. Not that one. Another one, I forget what the name of it is. Came out more recently, but certainly a worthwhile read there. Folks, thank you very much for being here. We have a full show today. Super chats are super helpful, so thank you very much. Tip jar is out. That's what makes these morning streams possible. Same thing goes for Rumble rants. We will read those. But without further ado, we're going to start our first segment of the day. We have a guest on who is organizing an event for East Palestine, Ohio, a rally and mutual aid event, which we will talk about in just a moment. But we're going to admit our guest, the organizer of this event. Most of you guys know who she is. She's on Twitter. She does a YouTube show herself, Savage Joy Marie. Man, Savage Joy, thanks. Good to meet you finally. I've never actually met you.
Yeah,
before.
you too.
Read your
Thanks
stuff,
so much
seen
for
some of your
having
stuff,
me.
but yeah, absolutely. No,
Thanks
absolutely.
for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.
That is a great background.
Yeah, it's kind of fancy.
Fancier than ours, that's for sure.
Yeah,
No, but
Caton stole this from his high school photographer.
yeah, exactly. It's my high school yearbook backdrop is what I have going on here. More low tech.
I'm a lit major. I was an English major in college, so the books are my wheelhouse. I dig it.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for reaching out and letting us know about this, because we always make time for East Palestine activism here. So this is the Eventbrite page, the March for Medicare for All rally and mutual aid for East Palestine, Ohio, Saturday, July 22nd from noon to 3 p.m. That is at the county clerk in Lisbon, Ohio. So do you want to just start by explaining what this event is, how you organized it, what the status of it is, and what are some of the organizing goals behind it? It says here on the page that the core demand is that Section 1881A of the Social Security Act be enacted for the people of the town. So can you explain for us what that is and how it's already been invoked before to a certain extent in a small and often unheard of town of Libby, Montana?
Yeah, so 1881A is something that was put into place. It's 1881A of the Social Security Act, and it was put into place, and a town called Libby, Montana has it. The reason why they received it is because they had asbestos in the air. And what that does is it gives people 100% free health care, known as Medicare for All, essentially. And it is for life. So these people have had this for several years. It was enacted on a state, or excuse me, on a local level. So it's not something that the entire country has to have. So essentially, these people have had free health care. The difference with East Palestine is that it is not just East Palestine that has been affected. There are many surrounding areas. In fact, even parts of Pennsylvania are also suffering because of East Palestine's derailment. So, and of course, it's, not that hard to understand. There's not like some, visible wall that stops, toxins from, from going into another state or town. The reason why we're having it in Lisbon is because it's like a neighboring town, but we have been told that, it is still super toxic after over 5 years, or excuse me, 5 months. It feels like 5 years. So we will be going to Lisbon, but I'm not going to get too into it, but some of us are going into East Palestine anyway. And doing, we'll call it a bit of a demonstration there, because you know what, we'll have hazmat suits, things like that. But we're coming from all over the country to do this, and we're not going to be that close and not do something of even more significance. So we have hazmat suits and all that stuff. But yeah, this is mainly to help draw attention to it. We do demand 1881A. And also, it's been over 5 months, and the governor, after extensions and everything like that, has finally had the balls to be like, okay, you know what? Let's give them a state of emergency. And Biden, I think we're on day 11, still just doesn't care, and has yet to sign this. He hasn't even talked about it Then again, he's been saying for 5 months he's going to stop there and go visit, and he hasn't. So really, it's up to us to demand and to provide mutual aid, because we know the government is not going to do anything, and this is the epitome of an example of that.
Well, it's interesting. The 1881A of the Social Security Act was basically invoked for Libby, Montana as a provision of the ACA. And during those negotiations, it was Max Baucus, Democratic senator from Montana, who actually got that in as a carve-out under the ACA. Ironically, Baucus was one of the most vocal opponents of single-payer health care during that whole negotiation. Not that it was ever being floated, but Bernie was chirping about single-payer at the time, and Baucus was one of the, whatever they call them, blue dog, yellow dog, I forget what fucking colored dogs they are, but you know, always something with the Democrats, right? All of a sudden, blue dogs, right? That's why you can't have it. But he was one of them, yet he created this carve-out for his people when he saw a political opportunity to do so. Now, on the one hand, that is infuriating because the sort of political opportunism is just kind of nauseating, right? How a guy who's so against Medicare for all, so against single payer, can see an opportunity to win points with his own voters, and so he'll carve it out for them. On the other hand, it's encouraging in the sense that even people who speak out against single-payer healthcare can be persuaded under the right circumstances in the right places. And in that situation in Montana, there was a mine that was poisoning the air in the town. In this case, it's 5 train cars full of toxic chemicals. So it seems like if it was able to happen there, why wouldn't it be able to happen here?
Absolutely. And one of the
Russell
things,
got a little vinyl chloride in the nose. It's coming this way.
It's like whenever you cover this story.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And you know, the thing is, in reality, we could have all gotten it for 3 years under the pandemic, because that is also applicable. Flint's been going on over 9 years. They could have it. I mean, the list goes on. And yes, I mean, the fact of the matter is it exists. It's there. It is just not being implemented. And I've become very, very close to a lot of the East Palestine residents who will be speaking next Saturday. And they are suffering so beyond anything I could ever try to explain. And they need this healthcare. Like, they need it. They are paying over $700 out of pocket just for vinyl chloride testing. Wow. They are experiencing rashes, boils, itchy eyes. I'm going to trigger warning, but little boys are peeing blood. Like, I cannot explain to you how bad this stuff is. It is awful. And they opened this clinic in town a couple months ago, run by Norfolk Southern, and the people there are working for Norfolk Southern, so it's very obvious that they are not exactly going to have the bedside manner. I've interviewed locals who say that they went in for blood tests to see just how many toxins they have in their blood, and the nurse said, you know, to be honest, I don't know what kind of prior drugs you have in your system, so I can't, rule that out. That's how they're being treated. And then they started getting bills for that so-called free clinic. The clinic has 0 specialists. It is made up of like 2 PCPs. That's it. So they go and they're like, hey, take a Tylenol. And they are still, getting pushback. How do you know that's from this? Well, I know because I've never had these symptoms before this time. So yeah, I mean, it is, I cannot even put into words how bad it is there. And I know I'm risking my health and safety, as is, a few of my co-volunteers, but it's learning about this and connecting with these people has absolutely changed my life. And if not us, who? Because most people aren't even talking about it, let alone willing to go there and bring them the aid that the government is refusing to acknowledge they need.
Indeed. Russell, do you have anything to add?
Well, there's a mutual aid component to what you're doing there. Can you tell us a little bit about that so people can help out, get involved?
Yes, that'd be wonderful. So there are multiple events that day. It's not just East Palestine. So when the money we've raised, East Palestine is only getting, a portion of that because there are other events. So at this point, we only have I think it's $4,000 for mutual aid, which sounds like a lot, but these people are still bathing in bottled water. This $4,000 is literally nothing. And I've been trying to raise money for this since April. So
Wow.
We're bringing pallets of water, groceries, items for the kiddos, supplies. We need way more than that, way more. And it's a week away. In reality, nothing is going to be substantial enough. But I've been screaming into the void, come on, folks, $5. It's an entire case of water for a family. And it's just not going well, quite honestly. So they need your help.
Yeah. Well, there's the link for the Give, Send, Go for the mutual aid component of this. Before I let you go, I just wanted to read a statement from Governor Mike DeWine's office, because as you mentioned, he finally did request an emergency declaration. He writes on their site there, the possibility remains that the voluntary support provided by Norfolk Southern could at some point in the future cease. The possibility remains that the voluntary support provided by Norfolk Southern could at some point cease, and this emergency declaration is needed to ensure that the state and federal government use all resources available to step in and provide the community with the needed assistance. So, as you said in your first answer, it took him 5 months to ask for that, and now he finally has. Do you have any sense of why he eventually gave in and asked? Because there was really no reason not to do this from the outset.
Right. I mean, it affects him in no way other than shows maybe he has a little bit of a fucking conscience. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, maybe a little empathy. At this point, I don't care if it's for political prowess or I don't care. I just care that it was done. But the fact of the matter is, that is just a blatant lie when he says Norfolk Southern continuing to help. What they've done to help is they have given everyone in East Palestine a $10 coupon to go to local businesses. They have had a carnival on contaminated land. They have had an Easter egg hunt on contaminated land. They have had a carnival and fireworks on contaminated land. This is how they're helping. They also just had a unanimous vote that they're going to put in a freaking amphitheater right in ground zero. $25 million. East Palestine has 3,000 people. What the hell is the point of that? This is how they're investing their money. And it's absolutely absurd to act like they are doing anything when these people have been displaced. Their family home of decades is getting demolished. They're living in hotels they're paying out of their own pocket for. The devastation is unreal. And to give people perspective, these are people with a median income of $27,000 for a family of 4 before this happened. So these people are poor. I mean, just absolutely poor. And you are taking them and you are violently making them struggle even more. And just not caring at all. And they did the Obama fake sip of water. And people who were local were like, okay, before the camera started, there was a pour from a bottle, and it's all these look at me, I'm on camera, everything's amazing. And the reality is that it is absolutely getting worse. Then they just had another freaking derailment a couple days ago. this is going to happen again, and not just there. It's going to happen all over, and people are going to be in the exact same situation. The difference is other people may be a higher income who it happens to, but this is on us to stand up and be like, you know what? Fuck you, Biden. You have the ability to sign a paper, give these people some help. It's not going to, cancel anything out, or supersede any of the, the shit you have done to these people, but it's going to give them at least some sense of reprieve. I just don't see people talking about it online. So it's up to us to hold these freaking, politicians accountable. And I just want to stress to everyone, this may be out of the media and even a lot of independent media, but this is still happening. And we will be live streaming. I've also interviewed about a dozen East Palestine residents who call me in the middle of the night crying, saying that they don't think they can fight anymore. So people have PTSD. They are suffering. They have depression, anxiety. 2 of them have reached out to me being suicidal. This is so serious. So I want to stress to everyone, this shit is far from over. And even if Biden actually did grow some balls and sign this today, it's still not going to be immediate. It's not going to be enough. And these people are already sick. And we're going to keep finding out for the rest of their lives more and more toxins that are coming up within their body.
Yeah, everybody who I talk to who covers this as regularly as you do say that they have to not only be a journalist, but they have to be a therapist to the people who they're getting information from, because not only do these people have nowhere to go for help, they have no one to talk to. They have no one to hear them out. So you've been doing a great job on this. I was going to ask if there's going to be video of the event on Saturday, but you answered that already. So we will cut together some of that, and we will incorporate that on our show the following day, because we're on Sunday night. So we will do a little feature on that for a little post game. And if you want to come on and talk about it then again for a little post game, we'd love to have you back, actually. That would be great.
That would be amazing. I appreciate it so much. And I just encourage people, please chip in, even if it's a few bucks. It means a lot to these people.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, let's see that link again.
Yeah, we're going to put this link up again here at the Give, Send, Go. That is a live link now where you can donate to help this event get off the ground, and obviously help in the mutual aid component of the rally and the protest action. I will clip this interview tonight as its own piece, and I'll put the link back in there again. But thank you so much, Joy, for joining us this morning. It was great to meet you finally. I've heard a lot about you. I've seen a lot of your stuff, but never actually got to talk to you. So it was a great pleasure. And we will be in touch. We'll have you back on Sunday to talk about how the rally went a week from tomorrow, or a week from Sunday.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brothers. I really, really, really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Savage Joy, everybody. Great work. That is just the story where you just have to keep going and keep going and keep going.
That was our promise to you when we started doing mornings. We said we're going to bring you Savage Joy in the morning.
Savage Joy. Savage AM Joy. Indeed. So thank you guys very much for being here. We're going to take some super chats right now and get on with the rest of the program here. Eric Husso, thank you for the $5. The Wake and Bake Pundits, politics with that cough. Yeah, we're not wake and bakers. I was never a weed guy. I'm not. I was never a smoker.
Me neither.
Never really dug it. But obviously, no judgment to you guys. If that's what it takes to get you up and turn on your computer or your phone or your tablet and watch us, then
it hurts my goiters.
Yeah, happy to be here for you. Biding 71, thank you for the 99 cents. We appreciate that very much, my friend. Super chats are super helpful. We'll also take Rumble rants if anyone wants to give a chat on the Rumble side. These are what make these morning streams possible. So thank you very much for putting a few bucks in our tip jar here. Eric, again, White House morning bump. Well, there you go. That's it. If there's anybody at the White House watching, I like the nose emoji for that. That's good. I think, yeah, that is well done, sir. Auntie Ann has a question for Russell. What coffee are you drinking today? Or did you drink today?
San Francisco Bay.
San Francisco Bay. We don't want to say anything official yet, but it's looking good for San Francisco Bay coming down the home stretch of the sweepstakes contest.
It is definitely, unless another coffee that is superior appears in a place where I can buy it.
Right.
There's a rule. I'm not gonna go for something I'm gonna have to ship every time.
Right. Exactly. So it looks like a big lead for San Francisco Bay, but we will announce the official Dissident Sweepstakes winners on Sunday evening's show. The Russell Davila Boycott Starbucks Dissident Coffee Sweepstakes.
Because the YouTube algo tells us 70% of our listeners are incarcerated. We're having two tiers: the cheap coffee and the medium coffee. I didn't go for the expensive coffee.
Right, not the really expensive.
I didn't do the Kona and all. I didn't even do that.
Yeah, the Jamaica Blue Mountain. That's how you get really up there. Mad Crab. Sorry, boss, can't work today. Due Dissidence is on. That's right. Call out.
Damn right.
Make that happen. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Pete Sweet, thank you for the $5. Selamat Pagi, good morning from Bali. Yes, thank you for doing an early show, evening show for me. Beautiful. So coming at us from Bali. See, this is why we do it. We always say, get people from all around the world. I knew Selamat Pagi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but when I lived in Greenpoint, there was a restaurant that opened right around the corner from me. That was the name of it. So that's how I recognized that. Never knew if I was pronouncing it right, but I did recognize the phrase. Thank you for watching from around the world, literally. Asbestos, part of a well-balanced breakfast. Yeah. Thank you, DC. We appreciate that very, very much. All right. We will get to some more super chats a little bit later, but let's do our second segment. So we just talked about the vital work going on in East Palestine, Ohio. We have a couple of labor actions that we're covering later in the show. So if there is a theme to today's show, it is economic strife and turmoil and desperation in America. But you certainly wouldn't know it watching mainstream media. Our competitors in this time slot over at Morning Joe, who, as I understand, are on right now, going head-to-head with the Due Dissidents boys.
And we do have a lot of overlap with their audience. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Looking to chip away at the Morning Joe audience. They went on a little monologue a couple days ago.
Show to be kind of like a kind of hairy Jew version of Morning Joe.
Yeah, Morning Jew.
Morning Jew.
Morning J-O-O. Yeah. Almost the same exact thing. Just got to swipe that E out for that second O, right? But they did a segment. Yeah, exactly. They did a segment the other day that was based on Joe Scarborough's article, which he wrote for The Atlantic magazine. So Joe Scarborough had a piece out in The Atlantic called America is Doing Just Fine. Now, we signed up for the free trial of The Atlantic magazine because we had to read their Orca piece, right? Remember a few weeks back, they put out that ridiculous hit piece on our Orca comrades?
Yes.
We just couldn't not read that. And
fucking
so we
whale
had to...
haters.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we had to spring for the free trial. I canceled it immediately since I would not be able to live with myself if I gave David Frum's magazine any money.
Fair enough.
Unfortunately, that meant we were not able to read the Morning Joe piece. But thankfully, Mika read some portions of the article on the TV program just a few days ago. So let's hear Joe Scarborough's diagnosis that America is doing just fine and well.
Doing just fine. You argue, quote, Uncle Sam deserves a modern-day Atticus Finch to argue.
You know what I just realized? Because we sped this up for time. Mika Brzezinski's voice sped up. Who does that sound like? It sounds like Hillary, doesn't it?
His case before the American people. And you
also
just
like her. It doesn't sound like her at normal speed, but when you speed it up just 15%.
A little bit.
There you go. It has that nasally quality now that it's a little sped up.
To argue his case before the American people. And you also write in part, quote, liberals once gained favor among their base by attacking the Pentagon's top brass, but now It is Republican members of Congress who longingly swoon over Russia's manly military while trashing U.S. generals and our men and women in uniform. Those GOP attacks come despite the fact that America's military is more powerful today relative to the rest of the world than at any time since the Second World War.
Okay, just so you know, because she goes on for another minute about the foreign policy stuff, those who are old enough to remember the Iraq War will recognize these lines of attack as literally identical to the lines of attack that the neocon Republican waged against Democrats and liberals at that time. You're blaming America first. You disrespect our military. You know, Joe Biden is leading the charge around the world. I mean, this is a pro-empire, pro-imperialism, pro-military, pro-America, pro-Western, unipolar world rant that he goes on here. This is the so-called left. Right, this is the so-called resistance to the right wing.
Unlike in
just
years
a nakedly
past, American
neocon
allies no longer grouse about the U.S. leading from behind or burrowing itself into a self-defeating America first hole. Instead, the U.S. is first among equals.
We're not going to lead from behind. John Kerry will lead from behind, right?
Yeah.
Same exact language. Scarborough is a neocon GOPer. That's where it comes from.
Well, this is it at this point, and this is what a lot of people are trying to point out. It's very difficult to discuss these things without using terms like right and left. But whenever we get into it, we do get a lot of people who say it's not about right and left. And you know what? You're right. You're right. It isn't. It is about elites versus the people. This is the elite mindset. When they look at Donald Trump, they're not offended by Donald Trump for any rational or reasonable reason. They're angry at him because he doesn't represent this elite consensus. That's all that it's about. That's it. I mean, in terms of damage done to the nation, they embrace George Bush. That tells you everything you need to know. It's not about what Trump did in office or might do in office. It's about the fact that he defies this consensus. They treated Bernie exactly the same way, and Bernie's not up there tweeting shit, right?
Right, exactly.
In a dynamic and expanding NATO alliance that just added a new member with more than 800 miles of Russian border.
Look at how proud.
Oh, yes! We got 800 more miles of Russian border. Take that, Putin! Take that!
Who are these fucking people who watch this? It's just amazing, man. I understand if you're a Washington elite and you watch this because this is checking in for your marching orders and your talking points for the day. But if you're just a person watching this and you think there's something in it for you to buy into all this shit, like, how fucking dumb are you?
She says that with such pride. We just added a new member with more than 800 miles of Russian border.
This is what's so disturbing.
Like, you understand we promised not to expand NATO 1 inch east past
1
Germany.
inch east.
And the reason we are on the brink of World War III is because we've done that. And now you're pitching as a bragging point that, oh, we pushed it right up to their border, 800 miles worth, baby. I mean, like you said, who is this for? This is for the elites and the wannabe elites.
Well, that's what's so disturbing and strange about people who are, whatever you want to call them, ostensibly on the left. Because, you know, there's a long history of opposing this kind of thing in that side of the political aisle. And it's just incredible. It's like the pot of boiling water and the frog. You know, it's just so slowly they got turned into Republicans that they don't even realize that they're now traditional right-wing Republicans. I mean, to the right, really, of traditional Republicans. You know, really, we do need to move to a vision of fortunate son, right? It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no fortunate one, right? Like, that's the people that are speaking out against war. And increasingly, as yes, many people will rightly point out when we frame things that way on the show, it really is not a right-left thing. It's the people versus the elites who are killing them. I mean, all this ties together. What Savage Joy was just talking about, what's going on in these regions. It's our elites, our institutions are killing us. They're killing us. They need to be overthrown. And a lot of the political ferment right now is trying to figure out how to do that and what you replace it with.
Exactly.
Has provided a devastating response to Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Looking east, the United States has finally begun its pivot to Asia, strengthening military cooperation with Japan, the Philippines, Guam, South Korea, and Australia. The current disruption in U.S.-China relations may have less to do with spy balloons and diplomatic missteps than with Xi Jinping's rational fear of being hemmed in by an increasingly muscular U.S. military presence surrounding the South China Sea.
Yeah, this is all wonderful
President
stuff.
What could
Biden
possibly go wrong?
It's all great stuff there. Yeah, exactly.
What could possibly go wrong with making the Chinese really nervous about
Yeah,
our
right.
presence in their territory? And why are we there anyway?
Right.
What are we doing there?
Right.
What,
Why?
what,
Because we're the best,
what does
baby.
the average American get out of that?
We're doing great, baby. We're the best. We're taking
doing
over the
great.
world.
Well, meanwhile, they can't recruit enough people to crew the military.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Like people don't want to join. It's partly that it's a nation of fat fucks, and no, you can't do whatever you want at any size. Try running the military obstacle course at 300 pounds. If you could do it at any size, believe me, they're desperate enough now. They'd take you. You can't. So you have that element, but you also, I was reading an interesting article the other day where they were talking about how, the military is studying this, and people that would be considered influencers, meaning uncles, fathers who served, are no longer telling the younger generation in their family to serve. They're telling them not to serve.
Well, yeah, because they don't want to go to the South China Sea. What do
Right.
they got to go to the South China Sea for? What do we need
Right.
to be there? What do we need to give years of our lives for that for? Right.
For what,
There's
for what
no
purpose?
morale. Exactly.
There's no morale because there's no faith in the people who are in charge of the military.
Right. There's no sense that there's a just mission, right? It's
That's
just
it.
this shit.
Right.
Diplomatic overtures toward India were likewise calculated to contain China's regional ambitions. Childhood poverty has dropped to the lowest level on record. Teenage pregnancy has done the same. The U.S. dollar has experienced generational highs over the past year. Unemployment recently hit a 54-year low. The number of job openings this past year also hit record highs.
Okay, this is another elite narrative. Russell has some figures about child poverty, but before I toss to him for that, the unemployment thing is largely, not entirely, obviously, but largely a red herring. Because as we're going to cover later in the show, what matters more than the unemployment rate is how much money people are getting paid on the job. Right? I mean, this is a lot like George W. Bush. Remember when that
I mean, under the Romans, I think you had almost a 0% unemployment rate, but most of them were galley slaves.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Nobody was unemployed. Right?
Remember when George Bush had that woman come, I worked 3 jobs. He's like, that's fantastic. That's wonderful.
Great. Let's pause for a second. Isn't that so American?
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, right.
That's American.
That's American. Work 3 jobs, could barely get by. So again, this emphasis on unemployment, both parties are obviously guilty of this because neither party gives a shit about working people. But this overemphasis on that as opposed to wages, benefits, security, savings, right? All those numbers, bad, and worse. But that's not what gets eyeballs in outlets like this. Now, in terms of childhood poverty, Russell did a little quick last-minute research bit on this before we went on. Do you have those handy?
Because it just didn't sound right to me. I was like, hang on, we have historically low child poverty? Well, not according to the Children's Defense Fund, not to be confused with RFK's outlet. That's a different thing. According to them, children remain the poorest age group in America, with children of color, children under 5, children of single mothers, and children in the South suffering from the highest poverty rates. 2 years since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, child poverty remains a paralyzing problem. Skipping ahead, although the number of children living in poverty has fallen from 11.6 to 11.1 million between 20 and 2021, in the final tally, the pandemic managed to push more than 1 million children over the threshold into poverty. Among the 74 million children living in the United States, 11 million live in poverty. 1 in 6 children under 5, that's 3 million children, were poor, the highest rate of any age group. The pandemic forced children already in poverty even deeper into poverty. Almost half, 47% of all children living in poverty live in severe or extreme poverty, a number which rose from 4.5 million before the pandemic to 5.5 million in 2021. So I don't know what they're talking about, because I don't see what would have happened. They cut the child tax credit. So why would there be less child poverty now? There should be more.
Yeah, it cut in half, and then it almost doubled back to its original rate. Yeah.
The South, home to 47% of children in our country who live in poverty, experiences the highest child poverty rates, with 1 in 5 children living in poverty. 9 million children faced hunger and food insecurity. 4 million children lived without health insurance. So, hey, maybe that's why Americans don't realize how great things are.
Right.
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe, maybe all of these people seeing children living in poverty connect that to quality of life. Right. Maybe they see that and they're not like, well, but hang on, man, we've really got China scared.
We added 800 Russian miles of NATO border. Isn't
There's
that great?
that.
There's that. We're on the way.
The Johnson boy has rickets again, but god damn it, those Chinese bastards are quaking in their boots.
Exactly.
Continues to surge forward despite economists' dire predictions. America's GDP grew to $25 trillion last year. Texas has a bigger economy than Russia, and although California is routinely rebuked by right-wing critics, it has the 4th strongest economy in the world, stronger than Britain's, France's, Canada's, or India's. The United States and its European allies collectively run an economic machine that doubles China's stagnating output.
Okay, all of that is to say that rich people are doing well. That's all that means.
Exactly.
That does not mean America's doing
stronger
well.
For who?
Right.
Stronger for who? I mean, if you have this enormous wealth generation and all the wealth is going to 6 people, and you got theoretically 1 million people, what the fuck does that mean? Is that a great economy? Is that an economy that's doing well? I mean, technically, it's generating a lot of GDP, but who's benefiting from it? That's the there's the problem. This whole article aligns because look at these rich cunts who fucking sit there on Morning Joe pontificating about the state of the country.
Despite record debt levels, a stubborn case of inflation, and other structural challenges, American capitalism continues to drive and dominate the world economy.
Oh, good.
A fulsome defense of Uncle Sam often requires dialectical
She's so
thinking.
excited.
I know.
But remember this. Even with all of its failings, America has fed and freed more human beings than any other country in history. And despite the blather that cable news hosts spit at you daily, your country is doing pretty damn well.
There you go.
Yeah, freed those Iraqis for sure.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Mika, for reading that for us. Over on CNN, here's William Cohan, or Cohen, but I've never seen the name Cohen spelled C-O-H-A-N. It's usually C-O-E-N or C-O-H-E-N. But he was a mergers and acquisitions banker for years, turned finance writer, whose body of work includes service for companies like Merrill Lynch, J.P. Morgan Chase, and GE Capital. Real man of the people here. Let's hear him say, the problem is the American people just don't want to be happy. They just like being unhappy.
A thread question from Professor Peacock. He goes, I'd like to see you explore why people think the economy is bad when the economic data says otherwise. You saw those poll numbers. People think it's bad.
I don't have an explanation for why people think it's bad, because objectively it is
they don't
good.
have money.
Hard to
That's why they think it's bad. I think it's bad because they don't have a lot of money.
That's it. Because they can't afford a house. They're not getting paid a living wage. They have to work their asses off. They have to work harder and harder for less and less money. And they have less and less ability to get ahead in the society, to start a business, to open a shop, to own a home, which is the main source of wealth generation for families, has been in this country for a long time. It's not even just what you're making. It's also about what you can afford.
Right. Exactly. That's why the UPS workers are getting ready to go on strike. They're not doing that because they want to be unhappy, right? And they're doing that for fun, right? By the way, this
Spoil
guy's the only
sports.
guy who saw Donald Trump's like spray tan and thought, I can go for that myself.
Yeah. I like that look. Hey, where do you get that can? What is that, number 46 shade?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Imagine it could be much better. It truly is. I mean, yes, inflation could be lower, but unemployment could hardly be lower.
See, what did I say? Unemployment. That's the red herring they always like to point to. Do you point to how much money people are making at the jobs? No. If people were making enough, there wouldn't be a strike wave going on.
The economy, our economy is growing. Our GDP is growing.
Same arguments this morning,
interest
Joe.
rates, were ratcheted up quickly beginning in March of 2021 and 2022. I would have thought, frankly, that would slow the economy down a lot faster and further than it has, which just goes to prove it takes a long time for higher interest rates to work their way into the economy. But, bankruptcies are not, exploding left and right. The economy is still growing. I don't know. Looks pretty good to me.
Do you think there's an element, people just like being unhappy?
People like being unhappy about a lot of things in America right now, and unfortunately. And I think, when, say, Mitch McConnell...
Yeah, no, people like biting their nails while writing out the rent check, right? People like sweating on the grocery bill receipt. They like that. People like worrying if they're going to have enough money to pay the gas bill, right? It's just a great American pastime, fretting over not having enough money.
It's just a bunch of whiners.
Right. Exactly.
I blame smartphones.
Right.
It's the smartphones have just made them weak and feckless.
Right. Exactly. I mean, these people wonder why they are as hated as they are, why the institutions that they uphold are as hated as they are. And then they'll come on the air and just say, but yeah, no, people just like being desperate and poor and miserable and unfulfilled.
Says his goal is to make sure Barack Obama doesn't have a second term. When he says, I'm not going to allow a Supreme Court justice to be nominated that should have been nominated by Barack Obama. When Donald Trump says, he won the election when he lost the election. I mean, I think people are just in a foul mood. So nobody wants to give Joe Biden credit for what is really a remarkable situation with the economy. You think?
Yeah. The nation got up on the wrong side of the bed all at the same time. That's what it is. No, I mean, this is really French Revolution level stuff, right? Yeah, this is let's eat cake.
Right.
Oh,
of course.
Why are they so angry? Why, look at all we're providing for them.
It's just unbelievably tone deaf. And when you look at the numbers we're looking at on child poverty, that's how sick these people are. I'm sure Scarborough saw some number somewhere that allowed him to make that statement. And he never looked at what the underlying realities of how many people are living in poverty there are. He read some stat somewhere that there was a drop at some point.
Right.
And he just ran with that. See, the childhood poverty is dropping. Okay, so let's say for the sake of argument that it was 1 in 4 children living in poverty and now it's 1 in 5. For the sake of argument, why would you feel that's something to be proud of?
Right.
Even if it's 1 in 5. Is that a system that's working to you? Really?
Right. Especially when you proved that you could cut it in half for whatever that stimulus was, whatever the child tax credit cost. I forget what it was. What was it? Something like $50 billion or something like that. I forget exactly what the number was. Let's say it was double that. Let's say it was 5 times that. Let's say it was $250 billion to cut child poverty in half. Well, by that logic, you could eliminate it entirely for $500 billion. What excuse is there not to do that, right? That's if you're going to take a victory lap for cutting it in half. But they took a victory lap for cutting it in half, and then they let the child tax credit expire where it almost doubled back to where it was before a second time. So how are you touting this alleviation of child poverty when you took something that you knew worked, you only went halfway, and then you undid that progress? So what the hell are you talking about? Child poverty is the lowest point in a generation. Like you said, if you're speaking very technically and you're proud that it dropped by 20% from 1 in 4 to 1 in 5, is that really something to be touting in the same essay that you're talking about military expansionism and global domination? Like you're bragging about the footprint that we put on the rest of the world while at the same time acknowledging this very marginal at best fix to a crippling and morally abhorrent problem that you're allowing to fester in some capacity, at least here at home. Again, you know what that is? Brainworms, man. Brainworms. Sound like Kyle now. You got brainworms.
Well, this is an argument for the greatness of England. You might have heard from an aristocrat in the Victorian era, right? And it's the same. It's the same kind of mentality, because they won't say this part out loud, but in the end, they believe you need a certain amount of childhood poverty because that's how it works. That's how the system works. That's really why you would brag about that, right? It's some people are just going to fail in the capitalist system. They're not going to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. But if on balance, most of the children aren't living in poverty, the system is working, especially when you see we're keeping these savages around the globe in their place. Right. I mean, it's funny because you can't say the soft part out loud anymore, but that's what underlies a lot of that. Right. Oh, we've got those Chinese hemmed in. It's really no different. They would have called them all kinds of slurs in the Victorian version. It's under there. They just can't come out and say that anymore.
Indeed. All right, folks, we're going to move right along. We got some labor actions to cover, but we are going to plug our patreon.com/do dissidents and give our supporters their name up in lights here. Part of signing up at patreon.com/do dissidents or dodissidents.substack.com means you get a shout out here. You also get call-in access to these live streams, as well as access to our member exclusive live streams, which happen twice a month over on Rumble. So if you can go and support us there, it is very much appreciated. We'll take some super chats here. Rebecca Rydberg, any updates on Jose Vega documentary? Yes, actually. I'm getting the initial sort of assembly cut together. We're going to send that to our composer at the end of this month, in about a week. And then once the music is done, we'll plug in the music, and then we will get a date to show it to everybody. We're still figuring out exactly how we will premiere that. We're not sure. Maybe we'll organize a screening in New York for people who want to come. If we can find a forum, maybe the People's Forum might be interested in hosting something like that. But it will eventually, I'm assuming, make its way over to YouTube.
That would be a good thing to reach out to them about.
Yeah, they have a space. They have a theater. That would be a great film to show. I'd like to do more than just put it on YouTube. I mean, I'm sure eventually it'll make its way here to YouTube or Rumble, someplace where everybody can watch it for free. That's our intention. We're not going to paywall it. But we might want to create a little bit more fanfare around it when it's finally done. But it is coming along. Movies, when you pay a crew to edit a film, it takes a year. So when we're piecing it together like this, it takes a little bit of time. But we are moving along on that. Like I said, the next step is to get the music plugged in. And our friend Nick Ingvoldstead, who wrote the great music for our theme song intro, he's going to be working on music for us. So we'll get that to him later this month. And then we will keep you guys updated. But you should expect a trailer to drop, I would say, within the next 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, we should have a little trailer that we can tease out for you. But thank you for asking. NK, thanks for the $4.99. It's disgusting that private corporations and deregulation cause these disasters, and our government only plays hardball with its citizens when something happens. Yes, indeed. While we're paused here for a game break, on our Patreon scroll, Russell, do you want to talk about your trip to the movies yesterday?
Yes. Okay. So I went to see Sound of Freedom yesterday, which, if they had just released this in 2018, it just would have been some movie. Like, it's not bad. It's on the good side. Like, it's good enough. Right. It's not like, oh, my God, I've never seen a movie like this. So, it was like Jesus, this was the theme of the last Rambo movie. Was the kids, the daughter got kidnapped by traffickers. Like, this is not the first movie to have a theme like this.
Isn't that what the Liam Neeson thing was?
Taken.
Yeah.
Taken. That was the whole point.
Huge hit. Taken. Yeah.
Huge hit. Once this became a culture war issue, which I have an upcoming monologue that touches on this, a shit post for Sunday. I'll get into this a little bit more. But originally this started.
Well,
with
Sunday's
20th
Indiana Jones. It'll be next week sometime, right?
It touches on.
Oh, it touches on. Okay,
it touches on. I'll do a more extended thing about this the following week. But this started with Fox, and then Disney bought Fox, and they decided to shelve it and not release it. One point that that Tim Ballard, the guy that this is based on, made is Q wasn't even a thing when they made this movie. Like, this is not by definition, this can't be a Q movie. It was done by 2018.
Right.
That wasn't even going on at that time. But at the end of the movie, he gives a speech. The star, Caviezel. Is that how you say his name?
Yep.
He starts talking about how he hopes that this movie is going to be like the Uncle Tom's Cabin for the subject of child sex trafficking and really start a movement. So they put up a QR code so that you can buy tickets for people. So now I had heard a lot of movie theaters were selling out for this movie. So I thought about telling my friend I was going with, who was buying the tickets, to buy them early. And apparently I should have. I didn't bother because it's New York. But he didn't, and we almost didn't get tickets. However, hang on, go back to the other one. As you can see, somebody bought a bunch of tickets, and it was not for people who actually attended the movie. So look, I took this when I first walked in. For Queens at 3:45 on a Thursday, the theater wound up being maybe 60% full, which is a lot. It's a lot for a movie like this in that time slot in that location. But certainly the house was papered. There were a lot. So when you see this movie is sold out, it doesn't mean this movie is sold out. It could be, some guy with a lot of money decided he's gonna buy a bunch of tickets, which
a ticket harvesting operation going on.
Basically, unless it's the adrenochrome of ticket sales.
Yeah.
So that part's really not clear. So then they have the message. They tell you when the credits are rolling, there's going to be a special message. Don't
go nowhere. And then there's a special message.
And then there's the special message. He gives the whole monologue, and then they have the QR code at the end. So overall, as a movie, it's fine. It's fine. It's entertaining enough. As a cultural phenomenon, what's going on around this movie is fascinating. And I'll get more into that on my shitpost.
Indeed. Let's take a few more super chats before we move on. Pat Donahue, thanks for waking up, or not waking up. It's the afternoon over on your side of the pond there. Thanks for the €10. Where are all those conservative flag wavers when their fellow Americans in Flint and Ohio are being poisoned and being screwed? It's tumbleweed. They're too busy waving flags. Sad nobody cares. Yeah, indeed. And, even the Trump visit there was a political win, obviously. It was a no-brainer to go there, but it's a performative thing. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. We look forward to watching some footage from those protests a week from Sunday and having Savage Joy back on. Extra Bulla, thanks for the $2, man. Thank you. If you need a goofy morning weather guy, hit you up. Yeah, we should do a weather report. That would be fun.
I want you to do the helicopter.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great. It's a good idea. I like that. For all the green lovers, 420. There you go. See, the morning show, you get a lot of that. A lot of weed
wake
culture.
And bake.
Yeah, a lot of wake and bake culture going on.
That's all. The YouTube algorithm tells us 70% are incarcerated and at least 63% are self-medicating, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Shamira Baloo, thank you very much for the $13.99. We appreciate that. And Mr. Fancy Pants says, Happy Friday. Thanks for the $1.99. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. We'll take some more of these in a few more minutes. Folks, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. We've got a wave of new subscribers in the last day or two. Our last show with Nick and CJ from RBN was a big hit. The clips have been doing really well, so we've maybe got some new people in the audience here. Thank you guys very much for being here. We're at 10,931 subs. Can we get up to 11,000 this weekend? What do you think?
I think we can. I think maybe by the end of the show, depending on how I answer this. Any reaction to DeSantis tanking nationwide? I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying all along. American politics can change overnight, and trying to call an election based on poll numbers before Labor Day is absurd. It doesn't matter. Now, look, if he has numbers like that in January, that's going to be significant.
Well, there's the debate in the end of August, right? And we'll see if Trump goes, but they have a debate scheduled for the end of August.
Yeah,
so
right now it means nothing.
That'll be an interesting evening. We might live stream that if we can. If not, we'll definitely come on after it's done.
This is when, look, if he goes up in the debates and that doesn't start to change, my theory is this. Trump's legal troubles are going to start to become more of a concern for Republican voters as we start to get closer to the actual voting, because in the end, they don't want another term of Biden. And if it looks like Trump's legal troubles are such that he can't win, or it's unlikely he's going to win, plus, I believe DeSantis is going to do very well on the debate stage. I believe that's going to change the momentum and trajectory. And that's why I say, hey, look, if after those things are in place, Trump is still winning, then I'm going to have to say, well, yeah, I was probably wrong. But at this stage, I mean, there's nothing to talk about yet.
Well, we'll see. That debate is coming up in about 6 weeks, so we'll see how that goes. I think it has more to do with Trump's poll numbers against Biden. I think in order for DeSantis to have an opening, you're going to have to see Trump lose ground against Biden in the general election polls, and you're going to have to see DeSantis start outperforming Biden in the general election polls, because their hearts are with Trump. So if they feel like Trump can win, they're going to back Trump.
But that what you're describing would be, that's a chicken and the egg question. I'm saying as his legal troubles start to grow, Trump's poll numbers start to go down.
No, I understand what you're saying. Possible. Let's go to a Rumble rant here. This is from Taddy Mason. Thank you for the $2, my friend. Child poverty wasn't cut in half with the tax credit. It would have been cut in half if the minimum wage went up to $15 an hour. That never happened. Tax credit was irrelevant. Well, the tax credit wasn't totally irrelevant. I mean, it did help. I mean, it was $300 per kid per household. So if you had two kids, it was $600 a month. That's $7,200.
Unfortunately, my cat didn't qualify. I tried.
Yeah, your cat. I did. I got that I think we got it for about 6 months. I mean, I can't argue the numbers for you. I know what was reported. Obviously, the $15 minimum wage would have been a huge boon, especially as it relates to these next couple stories that we're going to do. So we are going to head on to segment number 3. So UPS's contract with its unionized workforce of over 300,000 workers is set to expire at the end of this month. With no new contract signed, the Teamsters are preparing for what would be the largest labor strike by the numbers in American history. Here is a video that the union put out, just interviewing a few workers about their situation. I worked for UPS during the holiday season of 2020. That was the COVID Christmas. I worked as a loader and sorter at the warehouse, so they call that preload. I was not a driver, but a lot of the people who they're interviewing here did basically what I did. So I can speak to a little bit of this as well, but let's go to the workers themselves first, obviously.
Bush Kokich.
Brittany. How long you worked at UPS for?
About a year and a half now. Almost 2 years. 5.5 years. I left for 2 years. I came back and 2 more years.
Why'd you have to leave UPS?
Up to find a better job, better paycheck. I unload trailers on the first sort, and the second sort I sort.
So you're a full-time worker at UPS?
Yes, sir.
How much do you make here at UPS?
$16.65 an hour.
$16.65.
How big was your last check?
Like $400.
About $450, give or take, $450.
It was about $289.
It's not enough to live off of.
No, it's not.
What's your biggest demand here in this next contract?
Better pay for us. I went full-time about 6 months ago and was making 19, got dropped down to $16.65.
A lot more pay for what we do. We do a lot in extreme weather and we get paid like little nothing.
Yeah, so they do a lot in extreme weather. They're talking about $16.65 an hour. She says her pay was cut. You see the numbers being $400 a week, sometimes $300 a week. These are part-timers. So if you're a preloader, you work in the dead of night. You get there between 1 and 2 a.m. And the way it works is when I worked there, that was hired in September of 2020. So I'll show you guys the sort of pay scale for the part-time new hires by the year. So I'll show you when I worked there, August 1st, 2020. At the bottom there, $14.50. Now, I guess, as of the last wage reset, as of August 1st, 2022, you now get $15.50 an hour to unload trailers full of boxes, packages, parcels, sort them onto the different belts, and then load them onto the trucks for the drivers to take out. So it is constant, hard manual labor in the middle of the night, often in the freezing cold. You work for 5-6 hours per shift. That's why it's part-time, right? Because you're working, 5 days a week, 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours a day if it's a really, really busy day. The way it works, sometimes the reason why they say, sometimes they'll say I get $16.60, you often average a little over the base pay because overtime actually gets kicked in after 5 hours of your shift. So they allot 5 hours at base rate, and then you get time and a half for every minute after the 5 hours. So if you work 6 hours, you get 5 at the $15.50, and now you'd get that last hour at whatever $15.50 times 1.5 is, about 23 an hour. So you're going to average around 16 to 17 per hour. But like I said, that's manual labor in the dead of night, 5-6 hours straight. There is one break where they ring a bell and the whole warehouse stops. You can't take breaks in shifts because you have conveyor belts moving. So it's one break per shift. That break is 10 minutes. You get a 10-minute break to run to the bathroom, smoke a cigarette, and then come back. So there are 3 jobs that you do. You unload the big 50-foot trailers that come out from the airport, right? You put those onto a belt. Then there are the sorters. The sorters are literally, it is aerobic weight exercise for 5 hours. There's 2 belts up top, 2 belts on the bottom, red belt here, green belt here, yellow here, blue. It's doing that with heavy materials for 5-6 hours straight with one 10-minute break for $16 an hour, part-time hours. So your paycheck is what, $400? I knew so many guys who would work that shift in the dead of night. They'd go home, they'd nap for an hour, they'd work a 12 to 8 at Walmart. They'd go home, they'd nap for an hour, they'd be back at the warehouse, 1 to 2 a.m. That's what it is there. And good on the drivers for actually looking out for the part-timers, because a lot of the part-timers start out non-union. They have to work for 30 days to get it possibly admitted into the union. The way it works when you're not union, because I was hired seasonal with the possibility to admit me into the union, they pulled some bullshit where they were like, well, we closed the books 29 days into your 30-day period, so we'll see what happens. After the holidays, we'll see what happens, 50-50 whether you get admitted into the union or not. So I was like, well, fuck that. I'm not doing it. I can make twice what I'm making now delivering people's lunch, listening to podcasts and my iPod. The only reason I did this is because I wanted to get in the union. My wife didn't have a job at the time that gave health benefits and stuff like that. So once they started dicking me around, I left. But it's literally for the part-timers when they are on that probationary period. When I worked there, that was 2020, so they hired a lot of people, because that was going to be a record season because of COVID and stuff. They hired way more people than they even needed, figuring the job is going to be too hard for a lot of people to do, so some will quit. But when I would work there, it was a breadline, man. There were times when I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning, suited up, got the work boots on and everything, went there, and they said, we have too many people here. We're going to have to send you home. Sorry, you can't work. No pay, no nothing. I was lucky. I lived 5 minutes from the warehouse.
That's like the old shape-up system on the docks.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. And I was lucky. I lived 5 minutes from the warehouse, so it was not a huge deal for me. Still really annoying because I had to wake up in the middle of the night and get dressed, and now the whole night's sleep is shot. But there were guys who lived a half hour away. They'll wake up at 1 o'clock. They'll hit the road at 1:30. They'll get to the warehouse at 2 o'clock. They'll get turned around. By the time they get back home, back in their pajamas, it's 3 o'clock. They've been up all night for no money. They've lost money on gas getting there. So it's a horrible situation. That's on the wage side. Now, aside from the wages aspect of it, you also have a lot of workers who do get paid fairly well. The drivers make a fairly decent wage, but there's also the issue of safety and work-life balance. So here's a short video here from More Perfect Union. We're going to play the first minute of it regarding the safety issue, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the work-life stuff. But here's the first minute of this video.
I've worked at UPS for 29 years.
Oops, I'm sorry.
They're just abusing us out there.
Flowers in front of this Pasadena home are in memory of 24-year-old Esteban Chavez Jr.
Doing everything they can to completely overwork us.
Chavez was found dead inside of his UPS truck after delivering his last package for the day.
A lot more UPS drivers have gone down with heat-related illness.
He collapses, overwhelmed by the 110-degree temperature in Arizona.
And customers are starting to take notice.
It's just a sickening feeling that you don't know what's going to happen to that guy if he goes to the next house.
I think the comment that they made after is awful.
The company says that their drivers are trained on how to deal with the high temperatures.
The new guys, and I know it was 2 new guys that died from the heat stroke. They were working 6 days a week, you know, sometimes 12 hours a day. Excessive overtime is definitely the #1 factor of why we're having this huge problem with heat-related issues.
UPS at least listen to what we're saying. This is our job. We're going to show up every day and we're going to do it, but nobody wants to die.
All right, so there's just a taste of that. It goes on to talk about the forced overtime. You know, when you leave with a truck full of boxes, you can't bring boxes back to the warehouse and say, okay, we'll finish this the next day. No such thing, because there's another truckload of boxes that's coming on hours after you park the truck, because the night shift, they start to preload a few hours after you're done. And all of this is done via AI and stuff, which packages to load on which trucks, how they route them and everything. And so, yeah, I mean, these guys are out there from 8 o'clock in the morning to sometimes 10 o'clock at night, forced 14-hour days. Now, they do get paid like triple time past 9.5 hours. They make decent money. That's why UPS drivers tend to do pretty well financially. It is, at the end of the day, a fairly desirable job compared to competitors in the industry. They're the only unionized company of its kind. FedEx is non-union. Then there are companies that hire contractors out to, you know, drop goods off of people's house, like Censorship is one where you can use your own van or truck and stuff like that. You know, certain contractors, owner-operators, things like that. So the money is okay, but for the wages, I mean, they talked all the time at the warehouse about the drivers just having zero life outside of work. Divorce rates are very, very high as compared to, you know, normal jobs that pay around the same amount, just because these guys are never around. They're never able to do anything except drive these boxes around. And I remember loading these trucks up where I'm thinking, how the hell do you get all this done in even 10 hours, even 11 hours? I mean, you got hundreds and hundreds of boxes per truck with all these different stops, and it takes a while to get from point A to point B. And I was doing it during the pandemic, during the lockdown Christmas. So that's when, you know, demand was just through the roof. But it takes an extraordinary toll on these guys. And UPS, given how profitable they are, that's why these workers are threatening to strike now, or striking while the iron's hot. A little play on words there, because UPS took in $100 billion in revenue in 2022, $13 billion in profits.
All these shipping companies during COVID, profits went through the roof.
Oh, absolutely through the roof. And they still are very, very high, because, you know, old habits die hard. Once you start ordering the shit off Amazon,
there's been a big cultural shift. Yeah.
Everybody's itching to go back to Walmart. You know, like, no, not really. I mean, it's a cultural shift. Exactly. CEO Carol Tomei was paid $19 million in 2022 as a salary. That's actually down 30% from the prior year, 27.1. But still, just obviously an obscene CEO to worker pay ratio, given the quality of life on the worker side, the safety risks to the workers. I mean, doing this during the winter time is hard. Doing it in the dead of summer, you got a truck with hundreds and hundreds of pieces in it. You're in Arizona, you're in Texas, you're driving around all day. A lot of the trucks don't have those side doors. You know, the air conditioning is not great. They just drive with the doors open, you know. Really, really brutal thing. So in response to the labor organizing that's happening and the threatened strike, UPS published a Twitter thread, which the union guys took it upon themselves to sort of mark up with a bit of a red pen here to make some corrections. So the font's a little small. I'll read this full screen on my end. UPS put out on their social media, "It's time to set the record straight. What do you really get working part-time? Heat exhaustion, harassment, part-time poverty," was the red pen edit. That's the thing. The warehouses are so incredibly fast-paced. That's what they mean by harassment, right? A lot of this has to do with the part-time workers who work overnight preloading the things. I mean, it is really amazing. Like, the managers, they come around barking at you, "Faster, go, go, go." 1 10-minute break, like I said, from this constant manual.
"Work, you Jews! I promised Pharaoh a pyramid by the harvest."
Right, exactly. Here are 5 things that you may not know that we made up about working part-time with UPS and what our competitors would rather you not know. And they're saying those are lies we're putting out because we're scared UPS Teamsters would strike. 1, you get your money from the industry leaders. UPS part-timers make on average $20 an hour. They're saying it's more like $16. I explained that. The overtime kicks in after 5 hours. We usually work 6.5. So you're only getting about an hour and a half overtime per shift, which means you're getting a couple dollars above that base pay, which I mentioned now is at $15.50 an hour when you start. After their first 30 days, and our guaranteed annual wage increases and cost of living adjustments. They say that sneaky UPS cut pay for some part-timers by up to $6 in 2021. That I couldn't speak to. I wasn't there for that. The next section has to do with medical coverage. Benefits are famously very good for UPS. Notice they didn't mark any of that up because you do get great family health care plans and stuff like that. Health coverage, no deductibles, no to low copays, which is practically unheard of in the industry, by the way. That even includes pension contributions. So yes, they are correct. It is a very sweet benefits package. You know who that's thanks to? The union, not UPS, right? Like, that's because the union has a seat at the table.
They didn't get visited by 3 ghosts in the night.
Right, exactly. So, like, they're touting this as some, great act of kindness on their part. No, the reason they have great benefits packages and FedEx doesn't is because UPS is a unionized workforce. Moving on up, UPS has one of the strongest and longest standing promotion from within cultures of any company in America. Over half of UPS's management includes folks who were promoted from part-time and entry-level positions. Is that the same management that constantly harasses workers? Now, I can only speak, call this anecdotal if you want, but I got the sense when I worked there that it's very much my daddy was the manager, now I'm the manager, right? It's very much a family thing. And it really was wild. It was a very diverse warehouse. All the managers except for one were white. There was only one black manager there. Everybody else running around. It just feels strange. Call me a wokester if you want, to see these young, blonde, white guys going around screaming orders at black and brown people to unload the trucks faster and go faster and work harder. Come on. It feels fucked up. It's like, wow. Certain things don't change.
It was being run by Leonardo DiCaprio and Django Unchained.
Right, exactly. That's how it felt. That's a lot of how it felt. It really was.
That box has been sitting there for 5 minutes now.
Yeah, exactly. No, really, really, really eerie stuff. Invest in yourself. We've all heard those jobs that leave you without time for yourself. At UPS, tuition assistance has been an important part of our rewards package for both part-time and full-time employees for more than 25 years. You're eligible for up to $25,000 in tuition reimbursement from the day you start. That's one of the things that they used to kind of lure me in, because I thought, wow, what a sweet deal. Of course, if you're a working class person, you're probably going to school on a Pell Grant, which means that tuition reimbursement is kind of moot, right? Unless you're going to a private school that's costing you $40,000 a year, and that tuition reimbursement can kick in and help you. But most people who are working overnights at the UPS warehouse are not going to like Villanova. They're going to a state school, they're going on a Pell Grant, so the tuition assistance doesn't kick in for as many people as you might think. And this is here, I love this, side hustles welcome. Yeah, because you can't survive on 25 hours a week for $16 an hour, manual labor in the dead of night. So side hustles like, Walmart, right? Price Chopper. Whether it's starting your own business, exploring creative ventures, or working cash register at ShopRite, right? Kicking off a side hustle is a launch pad for your best ideas. With our industry-leading pay, poverty wages, and benefits, as well as work schedules that can fit your lifestyle, quote, change your shifts with zero notice, they add. Many of our people have found success on and off the clock, like brewery owner Steve Garcia, veteran and mentor Roger Campbell, and many others. Yeah, that's the norm. That's the norm. People are loading trucks at night and then starting small businesses in the daytime. Yeah, that's far more common than, like I said, a lot of the guys who load these trucks, they end up working at Walmart during the day. There was one guy I knew who worked the overnight at UPS. There was a Coca-Cola distribution center right next door. He would just walk across the lot and he worked there right after his shift ended. So that's life at UPS. And look, these strikes are going to be extremely disruptive if and when they happen. There's no getting around that. A lot of the corporate media outlets are, of course, emphasizing that. New York Times running pieces, how this will affect you. And, you know, they put the spin on it. The small business owner who's trying to ship their flowers out to the customers. Oh, well, this is going to crush them, right? No emphasis on the
next
plight
they're
of the
going to talk
workers.
about the old lady waiting for her medicine.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. How is this going to have people are going to get their stuff? There's no response to this except solidarity with the UPS workers. They need to be better paid and better taken care of. And it's a hard thing to solve on the time management side, because the only answer to getting people some work-life balance is to have more trucks. And a lot of these warehouses are spaced out to the inch. I mean, the trucks are parked 1 inch apart from each other. You don't have room to load more trucks. So how are you going to do it? You're going to have to
You'd have to build another warehouse.
Or you would have to hire maybe more contractors or unionize some of those contractors, get them on the books somehow so that you can have other vehicles going out there, sort of taking some of the load off of these drivers that have these trucks just packed to the hilt. So it's a problem that is going to be a little difficult to solve. I mean, there's not an easy fix to some of these issues. Some of them there is, like wages, just fucking pay them more. You can afford it. On the logistical side, when it comes to time management and things like that, yeah, those are some problems that are going to take some solving. But that's why it's good that they're threatening this action now in the summertime, because by the holidays, it's too late. By the holidays, you have to have these things solved.
Well, a lot of this is over 40 years of completely changing the way that corporations operate in terms of pay, where, as has happened across the society, if you look within the corporations, Thomas Frank is great on this. He always talks about how the average CEO pay in like 1970 was something like 50 times the worker or something like that. And now it's hundreds of times it's not that money's not there to pay. It's that all that money, and this will come up with the SAG strike, all that money is being funneled into the shareholders and into the CEOs and the senior executives. In order to reverse that, you need to completely reorient the economy, and the only way to do that is the same way they did it 100 years ago. You need to strike. You need labor actions. You need to make it impossible for these businesses to run that way. And then, you didn't just wind up with what Thomas Frank is describing. If you went back to 1890, it was very much like it is now. We backslid. We went back to the Gilded Age.
Right.
How did we end the Gilded Age? With strikes, with labor actions.
Right. Exactly. Well, the UPS action isn't the only labor action that's going on now. We have another segment that we're going to do on the SAG strike. So the Screen Actors Guild joining the Writers Guild and going on strike. So we're looking at the strong possibility of a total Hollywood shutdown for the time being. Oh no, what will we do without a new Indiana Jones movie to look forward to?
Look, it's the same thing. Okay, we'll get into it.
We'll get into it. We'll get into it in just a second. Let's take some more super chats, though. See, we do the super chats between segments. These are like our ad breaks, right? A lot of shows, they'll cut to commercial. They'll say a word from our sponsors. Well, we take a word from our sponsors. The audience are our sponsors. That's how we like to do this here. So you guys are who keep the show going, and thank you so much. Willie Bragg. Thank you, Willie Bragg. Thank you, my friend, for the $5.
Try Willie Bragg.
Exactly.
Gets the stains out of your collar in 30 seconds flat, or your money back.
Jimmy Dore said liberals hated Ralph Nader because they said he gave us George W. Bush. Now they love George W. Bush and they still hate Ralph Nader. Yeah, that was a good line of his. Yeah, indeed. What? Yeah, think of the irony of that. Well, you can't run third party. The Republican will win. Look what happened when Ralph Nader gave us George W. Bush. Right. Well, now you love George W. Bush, but you still have a hard-on for Ralph Nader for giving you George W. Bush.
That's the pre-Ellen Foxtrot Bush.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Times have changed. Mr. Fancy Pants, thanks for the $4.99. The Titanic is sinking and they're still steering the boat like, no, we got this. Completely oblivious. Yep. I agree. And the real test is going to be, does the strife that's happening in America actually make itself felt at the ballot box? Because I feel like the last couple cycles it hasn't. I feel like there's been a real effort to sort of normify the electoral process, which is why you had the results in 2018, 2020, and 2022, more or less. We'll see if that can hold one more election cycle. I doubt it, because people like us now are really challenging in a very, very forceful way the basic premise that the Democrats are the lesser evil. Not that we weren't challenging that before, but now that Biden has this track record, it's impossible to make that argument to most of us now. And so what does that do, right? Because at a certain point, you do have to act as if you have nothing to lose. And now you're at a situation where it's not a hypothetical. It's not, well, what if? We know Biden has a record now, and it's abysmal. And so that is what makes me think that the scales are going to tip back.
It's all fun and games until World War III is on the table.
Exactly. Dave Dillerai, thanks for the $8. Appreciate it. Capitalists are always sneaky. Set up conditions leading to high childhood poverty, then promote child labor. Yeah, that'll get them out of poverty, right? Yeah, that's something they have put on the table, a lot of them.
Sure.
Some of them in a sneaky way, some of them in a not so sneaky way. Some people just said, no, we need to sign 14-year-olds up to work more than just McDonald's.
Well, you know what? I was thinking about pitching this as a story. Maybe we'll do it Sunday. You have a lot of business owners now in New York are saying, I still can't staff my restaurant. This is completely inefficient that we have all these migrants coming into New York and we're not giving them working papers because I could staff my kitchen with that. Oh, you could staff your kitchen at the wages that you want to pay.
Right.
If you use migrants.
Right. Indeed. Pittsburgh Dude 87, thanks for the $2. The slaves are well fed and they're still unhappy. Yeah, that's how it sounds. Indeed. Tusker, a member and a supporter. Thank you, Tusker, for the $5 super sticker. We appreciate that very much. Do a couple more of these. Dave Dillerai, thanks for the other $8. Disney owns National Geographic. I hear the magazine is going bankrupt. Have you heard this? National Geographic going bankrupt? I have not heard that. It doesn't surprise me, though, that any of these magazines, because who's buying these magazines now? No. Especially National Geographic, it's a print magazine. It's very visual, so you kind of have to buy the thing. It's not, you can't just go to the website. But, who's buying these now with online information being what it is? And a lot of them, because they're not selling a lot of them, they have to jack the prices up. A lot of these magazines are like $15 a pop for a magazine now. It's crazy.
I mean, honestly, my wife, very early on in our marriage, she got me a subscription to National Geographic because I'm like such a geek. She just thought I would be into it. It was one of those things like, the book you keep saying you're going to read, but you just never do. That was how I was with the National Geographic subscription.
Right.
It's like, I'm going to look at these someday, and they just kind of piled up for the year.
Yeah.
I've really never cracked them open.
Well, you should do what a lot of people do.
It's a commitment. There's a lot going on there, like it's natural. There's a lot in there.
I mean, you should put them on the toilet. That's how a lot of people store their magazines. They put them in the bathroom. It's
true.
So, when you're in the office, you got nothing else to do, but now you got the phone. Now you can tweet.
Well, see, that's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem, because usually you are reading something. You're reading something on your phone.
Exactly. Philosophical Thirst Worms, thanks for the $5. I'm already seeing liberal white women do the new version of the World War I white feather thing while also simultaneously saying a draft is fear-mongering. Well, Biden is sending a few thousand troops over to Europe now, which we're going to cover on Sunday. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Thank you for the donation. Last one before we do our next segment. We are going to get to all of your super chats. Do not worry, we promise. Dan Richmond, thank you for the $10. Good buddy of mine has been a UPS driver since 1992. He's got some stories. Thanks for focusing on this brouhaha. Keep up the good work, fellow JOOs. Well, thank you, Dan. We appreciate that. And best to your friend. When you say he has been a UPS driver since 92, I'm assuming he still is, or is he getting up there in age? Is he close to buying his gold watch?
92.
That's a while. That's a while. But no, that's what I mean. Like, they do make decent enough money. People who drive UPS, they get paid pretty well. And so a lot of them stay because the benefits are good and the pay is good and the overtime is good. But it gets to a point where those other factors become very, very concerning. And as profits explode, there's more reason for these guys to say, hey, wait a minute, you can start taking care of us a little better now, because they're not stupid. They understand more overtime, more packages means more business and more revenue and more profits for UPS. So like, the longer they work, the better the company is doing. So of course they start getting the idea, hey, when are we going to get a bigger piece of this now that business is so booming? If we're working 70 hours a week, it means the company has more packages to take care of, which means they're making more money. And so that's part of what's driving us. All right, so we just talked about the UPS drivers. Now let's talk about some real hard nose to the grindstone, real tough guy laborers, actors. Let's talk about them, because they're about to go on strike.
They're a tough bunch of monkeys.
Yeah, exactly.
No, they're on strike now.
Yep, they are on strike now. They are on strike now. The Screen Actors Guild is joining the Writers Guild of America in going on strike. Let's hear from President of SAG-AFTRA, Fran Drescher. You all know her, famous sitcom actress here.
One of my people, literally. Jew from Queens.
Indeed. Here she is talking about why they are going on strike.
I cannot believe it, I cannot believe it, quite frankly. How far apart we are on so many things. How they plead poverty, that they're losing money left and right when giving hundreds of millions of dollars to their CEOs. It is disgusting.
Not to mention ketchup on a hot dog at the craft service table. We've been saying for years we need mustard and sauerkraut and relish. They're giving us ketchup. What do we look like, a bunch of goys?
And what's with the knishes? Yeah, right. You don't put cheese in a knish.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. She's with it. She knows what's up.
Shame on them. They stand on the wrong side of history at this very moment. We stand in solidarity, in unprecedented unity. Our union and our sister unions and the unions around the world are standing by us, as well as other labor unions. Because at some point, the jig is up. You cannot keep being dwindled and marginalized and disrespected and dishonored. The entire business model has been changed by streaming, digital, AI. This is a moment of history that is a moment of truth. If we don't stand tall right now, we are all going to be in trouble. We are all going to be in jeopardy of being replaced by machines and big business. Who cares more about Wall Street than you and your family? Most of Americans don't have more than $500 in an emergency.
All right. So, it's great that clip is circulating, because she gets a lot in there in a minute and 40 seconds. Like, she touches on a lot of problems there, a lot of bigger problems that are more systemic across the economy as a whole, and then a lot of problems that are more specific to her industry, like AI, streaming, and things like that. So go ahead. You got some stuff on this, Russell.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Just getting into the strike more generally before we get into the response from the producers. All right, so this is the Times coverage here. The Hollywood Actors Union approved a strike on Thursday for the first time in 43 years, bringing the $134 billion American movie and television business to a halt over anger about pay and fears of a tech-dominated future. The leaders of SAG-AFTRA, the union representing 160,000 television and movie actors, announced the strike after negotiations with studios over a new contract collapsed. So skipping ahead a little, this is interesting. Actors and screenwriters have not been on strike at the same time since 1960, when Marilyn Monroe was still starring in films, and with AI, she may be again soon.
Yeah.
And Ronald Reagan was the head of the Actors Union. That fucking old lefty. Dual strikes.
Fucking commie.
Commie. Dual strike. Well, you know what he said. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me.
That's right.
Dual strikes pit more than 170,000.
Larry, when you fuck a stranger in the ass.
That's a Ronald Reagan quote. That's where they got that from the movie. Yeah.
That's what he said during that strike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
His rallying cry on the picket line. You see what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass?
I want you to ask yourself this question, America. Do you see what happens when you fuck a stranger in the... Oh, I'm sorry. I meant, are you better off today than you were before? You're sorry. I got that confused.
Dual strikes pit more than 170,000 workers against old line studios like Disney, Universal, Sony, and Paramount, as well as tech juggernauts like Netflix, Amazon, and Apple. All right. So the producers did have a response to this. And they laid out 14 points that they agreed to concede to the union, arguing that actually there was no reason for this. That's the story they're telling. All right. So some of what they offered is the highest percentage increase in minimums in 35 years, 76% increase in high budget, video on demand, foreign residuals, substantial increases in pension and health contribution caps. They don't say exactly what those are. This is kind of interesting. It looks like, unlike with the writers, they conceded the AI point. I have a theory on why it's not as big a deal as it would be with the writers. Groundbreaking AI proposal, which protects performers' digital likenesses, including a requirement for performers' consent for the creation and use of digital replicas or for digital alterations of a performance. So it sounds like that's exactly what they were asking for. My theory on why they gave ground on this is because they understand the industry is changing. Tom Cruise is kind of, billed as the last movie star, and he probably is. The way that the world is changing in terms of content creation and distribution, you're probably never going to have a Marilyn Monroe or a John Wayne again. But they're not going to be bound by those contracts on their back catalog. They'll be able to put Marilyn Monroe in a movie if they want. So fuck these guys, right? That's why I think they gave right in on that. 58% increase in salaries for major role guest star performers' wages on high budget video on demand, streaming video on demand programs. Limitation of self-tape requests. I mean, that's kind of getting into the weeds there. 11% pay increase in year one for background actors, stand-ins, and photo doubles. An additional 17% increase for background actors required to do extensive self-styling, and an additional 62% increase for stand-ins required to deliver lines during a run-through, and photo doubles required to memorize and deliver lines. So, they laid out a lot of what they're offering. For something, when you're talking about only doing this pay increase for high budget movies that stream overseas, that's not going to help the average actor, right? The average actor is not in those kinds of projects. So, to the credit of the people who are running these negotiations, who are probably in the higher end of the industry, credit to them for not just giving in and holding out for those more struggling actors. And And a point that she's making there, she didn't get into the numbers, but for example, David Zaslav, who runs Warner Brothers Discovery, that cat gets paid about $250 million a year. So it is similar to what you're seeing with the UPS guys, right? Like, it's not that the money's not there in the system. It's that the money is not being distributed to the actors, to the writers, and so on. Now, that having been said, unlike UPS, where if anything, the trend of the world is towards having everything shipped and not actually going to a store to buy something. So this is a business whose profitability is only growing. This is a business that reflects the future. Whereas Hollywood, I would say part of all of this tumult is that Hollywood itself is a dying business model. Why do you have an industry like Hollywood? Because there's a bar to entry, because the average person can't generate the resources to make a movie, right? So you have an industry of people who have the capital to provide the cameras, to provide the sets, to provide the necessary labor. The combination of outlets like YouTube that allow schmucks like us to just distribute content, run it up the flagpole and see who salutes, with what AI technology is going to allow you to do with your software in the next few years, Hollywood is not going to make any sense anymore. You might have a remnant industry there, but we're moving into a world where we're continuing this trajectory of little niches with its own personalities, with its own celebrities. This is part of why you can't get a movie star anymore, right? Look, for example, in our little universe, right? In our little universe, Sabby Sabs is an up-and-coming rising star, right? Cenk and Anna are very famous. Nobody knows who the fuck these people are. You go up to the average person, go, hey man, you know Cenk Uygur is? I don't know who the fuck Cenk Uygur is. And that's about it. That's the biggest name in the space, right? But very famous within this space. That's the world we're moving into. That's where things are going, where you're just going to have little sub fiefdoms of fame depending on people's particular interest. And what's really going to kill Hollywood, when a 12-year-old is going to be able to pull up ChatGPT and make a movie, what the fuck you need Hollywood for anymore?
Right. No, absolutely. And, that's on the creative side. On the distribution side, I think the writing on the wall really came in the music world, because they already went through this. Like, the record labels are like what they went through years ago, what the big Hollywood studios are going through now, right? With the advent of iTunes and Apple Music, Spotify, right? It was really, really hard for bands and artists to make money off of creating albums anymore, because you only get paid a piece of what those streaming services take in. Yeah, right. If you're not selling an album on iTunes, if you're just getting a piece of whatever the streaming services are, you're getting a very small piece of an overall and ever expanding pie. So it's great for Apple. It's great for the forums, but it's not great for the individual artists. That's why now, if you're playing music, you have to go and tour constantly in order to make a living as a band, right? Unless you're Taylor Swift and you can sell, unless you're a major star like that, where you could still make a lot of money off of records. That's not how you'd make money anymore. And a lot of that's happening in Hollywood
too. I was just watching an interview on, I think it's called Film Courage. They do a lot of interesting interviews with people in the industry. And this woman, she still writes novels. And she said, when I wrote my first novel, they gave me $50,000. I sold my last novel, they gave me $4,000. So you're moving into a world where now you're almost better off self-publishing. I mean, it's why a lot of people are doing it now, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have more potential to make huge money off your self-publishing than you have going into all the gatekeeping that you're going to have to go through to get your novel published. Like, it used to be much more stigmatized to do that. But even that, everything's becoming decentralized. Everything is becoming, content creation and build your brand. And if you want to put your stuff out there, try to build an audience or a market for it. So a lot of this strikes me as, she said at one point, I don't think we played that part. She said at one point towards the end, what are we doing? Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So it's kind of interesting. On the one hand, she's acknowledging that this is a sinking business. And on the other hand, she's asking them to redistribute the wealth, which...
Well, they have to reorient, right? I mean, look, there's always going to be a demand for movies.
Sure.
Right? But they're going to have to reorient. It's not going to look the same as it does
and it's not going to be as big an industry as it exists. Like
no, because it'll be completely decentralized.
The studios, exactly. Right. It's just not going to be the business it is now. It's not going to be as big. It's not going to have the cultural influence and impact that it has today. And, this will relate to, we're going to get into the theaters as well. People aren't going to the movies like they used to. They'll come out for certain things, right. Which, there's a whole conversation on, did Hollywood go too woke? And that gets into the theater thing too. I think that's part of it. I think that's definitely part of it, that they're not producing content that people want to see. And you can see that in the performance of Maverick and Spider-Man No Way Home, and recently Into the Spider-Verse. Like movies that are not like very cringy, woke projects are still doing well if they're well made. So people will come out. But it used to be that you could just kind of throw a movie in a movie theater and there was just some audience for going to the movies. It didn't have to be Top Gun Maverick.
Right, exactly.
Right? That audience is kind of gone. Just the casual movie-going audience, it seems like that's gone.
Right, like when I was a teenager, me and my buddy would just be like, we would go once a week on Saturday.
Oh, me too.
The school was that. We was like, what's playing? What's playing tomorrow? Let's pick something. That's
right, because you didn't because you couldn't watch shit at home.
Right, exactly.
Right,
exactly.
I mean, so of course, unless most of what was on TV was terrible. So if you wanted to see something good, you had to go to the movies.
Right, exactly. You don't like my music. See, not only are we not censoring you, we're actually featuring you here. Spotify pays about $8 for every 1,000 streams. Exactly, right? So if you're this, mega star, you can make decent money putting out an album if you're getting millions and millions of streams. Right. If you're a band that, can't sell 100,000 albums, how many streams are you actually generating on these platforms? And you're getting paid almost nothing per play. So if you're not Taylor Swift, you got to hit the road and charge money for tickets and sell merch at the merch tent to make money now, right? It's very, very analog. It's a completely different world. All right, we're going to get into our theater piece. A couple of old theater guys that we are. Let's read a couple of these before we do that. Courtney, thanks for the $4. Courtney and Russell met up for coffee, yesterday, right?
We did. I spotted her from a block away with that hair.
Excellent. Where'd you guys go? What part of town?
Just right by my house.
Okay, up in Harlem.
Up in Harlem. Yeah.
Perfect. James Van Der Zanden, thanks for the $1.99. As a union member, SEIU 503, UPS workers will win. Well, solidarity, my friend. Absolutely. Oops, sorry. See, I almost blocked Courtney. See, that's how careful you have to be on this back end.
I know.
It's very easy to do.
I almost blocked Tusker that time.
Yeah. KN Kareen, thanks for the $4.99. I love my UPS driver. I give him water and tips. He's so amazing. UPS need to treat their worker better. Yeah, my parents used to make jewelry. That's how they made a living. They were jewelry vendors at street fairs, and they would ship wholesale. So they got to know their UPS driver very well. What's that?
Carnies.
Yeah, Carnies, exactly. But they also sold wholesale, so they would make jewelry at home, and the UPS driver would come almost every day. So, yeah, they knew their UPS driver very well as well.
Okay, so longtime viewers of the show know that the severely mentally ill son of the former landlord that they're trying to evict is still living down on the first floor. So at one point, a package was all smashed up that came into the building, and everyone assumed that he did it, because who else? But they went back and looked at the video, and it was actually the UPS driver. Whatever it was that had gotten to him that day, man, he was on camera just kicking that package and punching it and shit.
Having a rough day.
But now you look at all this and you say, yeah, man, I mean, you can't blame these guys for snapping, right? Surprising more of them don't.
Absolutely. Well, it's a thing. You can go postal. Now you can go parcel, right?
You can go.
I'm gonna go parcel.
You
Folks,
went
hit that
full
like
parcel.
button. Hit that like button. I don't know how many likes we're up to, but we got to juice that algorithm here on the morning shows. We're getting up around 500 live viewers in YouTube. We are over at 70 on Rumble, so a nice morning crowd here for sure. But let's hit that like button to get some more people in here, get some more people watching the replay. All right, so we have one more main segment that we're going to do, but first let's do a little addendum to our SAG segment. You found this article about live theater in decline about a week ago, so we've been wanting to cover this for a little bit, so why don't we get into this now a little bit.
Okay, so this has been coming for a while. This has been coming even since before the pandemic, but post-pandemic, theater is totally collapsing. So just to read a little bit, evidence of the turmoil mounts day by day as companies from California to New York announce major cutbacks in their offering or shut down altogether. The theater world was further rocked recently when one of the nation's largest companies, the Los Angeles-based Center Theater Group, said it would pause programming in one of its theaters, the Mark Taper Forum. That followed the upheaval at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, another industry mainstay, which said last month it needed an emergency infusion of $7.5 million, or its 2023 season could not go on. The urgent effort came after a similar plea in April, for which OSF raised $2.5 million. The cutbacks and closings have been so regular of late that a document circulates among leaders of the field listing recent permanent closures, such as Triad Stage in North Carolina, Southern Repertory Theater in New Orleans, New Ohio Theater in New York, and staff and program downsizings. And speaking of Joe Papp, coming up, the Public Theater, which he founded. In June, Off-Broadway's Public Theater eliminated its Under the Radar Festival, which set an industry standard for avant-garde and international plays. To save money, even August companies such as Arena Stage, working with what its leaders call deficit planning, are reducing the number of plays they produce. And just last week, Chicago's 35-year-old Looking Glass Theater Company, debut theater for Tony-winning director Mary Zimmerman's Metamorphosis, declared that it was ceasing operations until late next spring. As regional theaters are often the seeding ground for both new play development and work that eventually goes to Broadway, every pause can have consequences down the road. Okay, so I can say as a theater person, this has been coming for a long time. You somewhat have a generational change, very similar to if you've ever gone to the symphony. You only have people who are like 73 there.
Right.
Like, look, for my grandparents, they went to the theater, right? When Death of a Salesman opened, that was a cultural event. You had to go see Death of a Salesman. There is no such thing anymore. There is no such thing as a Broadway show that is part of the cultural conversation in that way, right? So theater just hasn't occupied that place in society since my grandparents' day. Now, their children, the boomers, because their parents were into theater like that, doing a kind of avant-garde experimental theater was a big part of the counterculture. So you did have that with the Living Theater and, Mabou Mines and all of these groups. And you had what Joseph Papp was doing, where he was trying to open it up to more people. By the time you get to my theater days, Gen X, it kind of fit the do-it-yourself thing that Gen X had going on, right? I mean, they were kind of into these very handmade, cheap things. And also because the boomers had done it. So, there was some element of that. As soon as you get smartphones, as soon as the internet streaming really became a meaningful way to distribute content, once it really became possible to just start throwing your stuff onto YouTube, a lot of that whole scene started to just completely collapse. Like the whole, even talent that wants to be involved in it just completely disappeared. And now you have the pandemic, very much like with movies. People don't want to go to movie theaters. They don't really want to go to theaters anymore either. Now, an element of this that this doesn't get into, but it's part of my personal observation from people I know who are still in the business or struggling to get audiences back. I said this was going to happen before the theaters even reopened. The most COVID neurotic fucking people are the people who go to see theater still. It's libs. You don't have a conservative audience really for this stuff. It's basically libs.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. And I just want to say something about the chat because a lot of people were mentioning Hamilton. Hamilton, you're right, is the closest thing to what would be like a water cooler type zeitgeist cultural event. But it's not the same because it's very expensive. People are priced out. There's only a certain cohort of people who can actually afford to go and see it. The era that Russell's talking about is the era of, don't forget, Times Square was a seedy part of town, right? Theater was a working person's thing to do, right? I mean, it was not this luxury experience the way Hamilton is, or even even the most successful plays like Wicked and Book of Mormon and things like that, right? It takes a certain person with a certain amount of money in the bank to be able to take the family for $600 to go and see Wicked or, whatever. Back in the day, Russell's talking about working people would go to the theater.
Right.
Everybody
my grandfather
could do it.
was
So
no
it was more of
sophisticate.
Right. It was a cultural event. It was a more cultural event. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's why I mentioned my grandparents, because they weren't like these, upper class people.
Right.
And they saw Death of a Salesman. I tell you, my grandfather would tell me about going to see these iconic shows from that era. It was a big deal back then. Like, who can name a modern playwright anymore? Like we can. Back then, people would have known Arthur Miller. Man, that would have been a big deal.
He was famous, right?
Of course,
married Marilyn Monroe, right? I mean, they were stars back then. Yeah.
So it does get into the pandemic a little bit, but it gets into it more. This article is arguing that they got used to not going to theater, which I would agree with. That's part of it, just as with movies. People got out of the habit of going. One thing that they do get into, and I don't want to say it's just this. I've often said that one of the great tragedies of my life has been watching the arts community become one of the most pro-censorship sectors of society. It's just absolutely crazy to me. And a big part of that is because as it's become so expensive to do and such, by definition, an elite art form, it's just been overrun by trust fund kids and Yale graduates and rich kids. Like when I first got into theater, you had people who were from the streets of St. Louis who slept in the theater, who really had you really don't have those kinds of people anymore. And as a result, they don't have Joseph Papp's perspective on what diversity means. They have a woke perspective on what diversity means, which this is very revealing to me. So,
right, their version of diversity is basically guilt management for them. Right.
Well, it's all very niche identity groups.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Rather than, okay, so he envisioned this is a artistic director that was hired for the Long Wharf Theater that's leaving its theater space but trying to continue as a company. He envisioned Long Wharf expanding its reach to underserved communities. This has meant offerings such as Black trans women at the center. Wow, that's going to bring them in. A multi-year digital festival of new work and I Am Muslim/American, a film by Elia Miller and Halima Flynn that Long Wharf has taken for talkback sessions across Connecticut. So this also gets into how a lot of their donors pulled out because they're starting to produce this kind of work that the donors really don't want to support. Now, when you look at the Pap era, when you look at descriptions, which actually the book I recommended has some descriptions of this, when he brought Shakespeare to Queens and dropped it into parks in Queens, those audiences were very diverse.
That was the whole point. Well, that was the whole point. Yeah.
That was why he did it. That was why he did it. He was thinking, how do you get this work to people who are never going to pay money? Look, when you grow up outside of Manhattan, when you're talking specifically in the New York context, we don't call it Manhattan if you grow up in Queens. You call it the city.
The city, yep.
Right?
Exactly.
And unless you work there, you only go there for an event. It's like an event. You go to when I was a little kid, the only time I was in the city, they would bring me to Barnum and Bailey's circus. Right. Once a year, I would go to the circus. Otherwise, I wasn't in the city. So Pap recognized that. He was a native New Yorker. He was like, they're not going to come to the city to see Shakespeare. So you got to bring it to them, put it right in their neighborhood where they're going to come see it, and make it free. Make it free so there's no economic obstacle. It says a lot to me that reaching out to diverse audiences, reaching out to underserved communities, it doesn't even seem to have occurred to them to do that. To do anything like that. If they were sitting there saying, yeah, we're going to start doing work in the projects with kids in the projects, we're going to train them in theater. And honestly, I'm not saying nobody's doing that. I don't see anybody doing that. Whenever these theaters say they're going to diversify, it's shit like this. It's
putting on shows that sort of assuage the guilt and anxiety of a white upper class audience. That's what it is.
And a lot of their audience, a lot of their donors, because this is the thing with these regional theaters, these are not commercial enterprises. Their financial model is completely dependent on having their donors give them money. They're all not-for-profit theaters. And subscriptions, selling subscriptions. So you start to reorient your programming around stuff that doesn't really speak to people. Well, now you're asking them to donate as kind of a tithing. Now you're turning your project into a church, right? They have to come and worship this ideology because now you're pushing an ideology. And look, a lot of people are like, there are a lot of needy organizations. Why are they going to write a check for your Black trans women at the center project?
Right. And especially since, look, the history of American theater, there's a lot of radical playwrights and radical plays. Lorraine Hansberry was a socialist. Raisin in the Sun was the only real work she ever did. She died of cancer very, very young. Mm-hmm. That has a lot of themes of capitalism and business and alcoholism and abortion, religion, all this stuff. That's not a radical play, but you had August Wilson, radical Black writer, Leroy Jones, even nowadays, Susan Laurie Parks, Top Dog Underdog, even a play like Rent. Rent was a major hit. It was a major sensation. That's a pretty gutsy play. Rent is an amazing piece of work that takes on some really difficult issues in a very head-on, emotionally just devastating way. It's a really fantastic piece of theater. And so, you've always had that. Now it strikes me, especially when I would go and see like new works, a lot of it is just superficial virtue signaling to an upper class white audience. That's how it plays.
That's it. How a lot of it plays. And that is your audience. And when they diversify to the extent that they diversify the people working in the organization, it's not class diversity. They'll try to get more non-white people, which is still a challenge, honestly, when you look at who runs these things. Yes. But they're from the same privileged backgrounds that the white people are from. They're not from the lower classes. They're not from the working classes. And the result is, if you look at what few indie theaters are left today, and you look at what their performance schedule is, it's monologues about being gay. It's monologues about being trans. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing else. It's not that there's no room for that.
Right.
It's that's it. Like
Right,
that's
no,
your whole
exactly, yeah.
programming.
Yeah.
It's basically, it took longer to get to the theater. This happened in the fine arts a while ago, where every gallery exhibit has to be about the challenge of intersectional identities facing blah 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 blah. And now it hit the theater communities because it's been overrun by the same social class. So yeah, that's definitely an element of why people aren't going. There's definitely other things, the pandemic, the way it shifted habits, generational, and the same thing to a certain extent that movie theaters are facing. I will say, in terms of big picture with all of this, you'll hear this argument more from people who are perceived as being conservative. Again, who knows what that means anymore. A lot of people will point out that people who are isolated and alone are easier to propagandize to and control. Now, I'm not saying that that's by design, but what I will say is this is not really a good development for psychological health and for human community, that we're gradually abandoning a lot of the things that people used to do together as a community. Now, you might say concerts. People are never going to go to concerts the way they used to go to a movie, right? Like
Right.
it's just too involved. It's too expensive. That's another thing. I mean, the first time I went to a concert, I was 13. The ticket was $13.50. It was totally
it's all of a
affordable.
piece. It's what we talked about with SAG, right? If the bands can't make money selling albums anymore, they're going to charge a lot more money for the concert. And now you're not going to
Right.
be able to afford to go to the concert, which means the
Right.
only way to consume the music is by yourself on a streaming service that you pay $9 a month for, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
You've made so many of these things out of reach of the average person. And also the availability of the technology has made it such that people are highly demotivated to go someplace and do something. You see it in the nightclub culture too. Nightclubs are gone, basically.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah. When was the last time you had a popular club even in New York? There was, in every decade, there was
That scene dried up when I got married.
Yeah. No, you had Studio 54, you had the Limelight. Like every decade there was a defining club. And now there's no such thing because people don't, I was producing at the Cutting Room, which is still open because it's co-owned by Chris Noth, so he's willing to pour money into it. But the guy who really runs it, he would tell me a lot because he came out of the whole nightclub scene going back to the 80s. They say, the only reason we're able to stay open is because we rent out for events.
Right.
And I would see like their nightclub fare, really not much of an audience.
All right, let's do our final segment of the day. See, we're theater. We can go on forever about that. But we'll go one more segment here. We'll do some super chats first. Thank you guys for being here this morning. We're up over 500 in the YouTube chat. That's what we like to see. Please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Nobody thanks you for the $5. Where the people's voice is not heard, there will be revolution. The world teacher, a.k.a. reference Benjamin Creme. Thank you very much for the donation, my friend. Philosophical Thirst Worms. The writers are talking about both sides of their mouth. We got you through the pandemic with our amazing writing, but I don't like your writing. The execs that made me write the bad things. Yeah, I mean, look, we've talked about that, about just the quality of the writing in general, which I agree. I mean, I think the quality of the work has just gone absolutely downhill. That doesn't change the fundamental dynamic, though, that there's still a lot of money to be made. Somebody's making it, and so they got to start sharing it, right?
I mean, there is, that's definitely a whole other side of this, that Hollywood is losing billions of dollars now, and a big part of it is the quality, because it's not just a drop off in the movie theaters, it's a drop off in viewing, streaming.
Right.
People aren't watching their streaming shows because they fucking suck.
Right, they suck. Exactly. Karen Smetanovska, this is not a super chat, but can you guys cover the student loan forgiveness today? I saw something about that before we went on. We didn't have a chance to look into it before the show, so there's some action that's been taken. I didn't get a chance
to look at the headlines.
Yeah, we'll do that on Sunday for sure, though. Thank you for letting us know about that. Rebels here. two-pack performances of Into the Woods with the youngest audience I've ever been a part of in years. Well, that's good to know. Into the Woods is a brilliant piece of work. I played Cinderella's father in the high school production of Into the Woods. Into the Woods is an absolutely brilliant play. I love it.
Okay, so yeah, they're going to wipe out $39 billion in student loans for 800,000 borrowers.
Interesting.
804,000.
We'll do that Sunday for sure. Frank and Kitten, thanks for the $1.99. Uber Eats or DoorDash driver advice. Thanks, comrade. Thank you, Frank and Kitten. My biggest advice, I want to convene a roundtable panel to do this on the show because a lot of our audience drives that kind of stuff, and so do I. The biggest advice I would give to you in just a short period of time now is be picky about which orders you take and which orders you turn down. Only take the good orders. Do not take the garbage orders. Be making at least $2 a mile. So only take the 2.5 miles for $7. That's a good order. $5.50 for 4.5 miles, decline. Right? That's what it's all about. Because not only are the bad orders, but they take time. There's an opportunity cost, right? Because if it takes you 20 minutes to fill a $5 order, you're no doubt missing the chance to take 3 or 4 much better orders, right? So you have to think of it that way too. But I really do want to convene a roundtable on that. I think it would be very, very useful that we could put up on the channel.
Yeah, because we know a lot of professional drivers.
We know. And it's becoming a very common thing for people to do. A lot of people dash now. That would be something great that we could do. All right, folks, we'll take a couple more super chats before we wrap. Last call to get those in because this is our final segment of the morning here. The House Judiciary Committee's Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government issued a report this week alleging that the FBI worked at the behest of a Ukrainian security agency to censor Americans on social media, particularly in the days and weeks after the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. So I'm just going to pull up here the executive summary of this report and read a little bit from it. On February 15th, 2023, as part of its investigation into the federal government's role in censoring lawful speech on social media platforms, the Committee on the Judiciary issued a subpoena to Meta, the parent company of Facebook, and Instagram and Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and our dear platform that we love very much here right now. Documents obtained in response to those subpoenas revealed that the FBI, on behalf of a compromised Ukrainian intelligence entity, requested and in some cases directed the world's largest social media platforms to censor Americans engaging in constitutionally protected speech online. So here's the FSB, as they say, infiltrating the SBU, which is a Ukrainian agency, requesting content be taken down to the FBI, and then the FBI would pass that request along to the social media platforms themselves. The committee's investigation has revealed that the FBI, federal law enforcement agency responsible for disrupting foreign malign influence, facilitated censorship requests to American social media companies on behalf of the Ukrainian intelligence agency infiltrated by Russian-aligned actors. In doing so, the FBI, they write, violated the First Amendment rights of Americans and potentially undermined our national security. In light of well-documented incidents of the FBI's civil liberties abuses, this new information raises grave concerns about the FBI's credibility as the nation's premier law enforcement organization. Here you can see a calendar that outlines when certain requests were made and to which social media companies they were made to. That is March of 2022. So as you can see, a lot of content moderation requests coming in at that time from the SBU, which is the security service of Ukraine. The committee's analysis of these disinformation registries revealed that the FBI, at the request of the aforementioned SBU, flagged for social media companies like the authentic accounts of Americans, including a verified U.S. State Department account and those belonging to American journalists, one of those being Aaron Mate, The FBI and SBU repeatedly requested the removal or suspension of authentic accounts expressing unambiguously pro-Ukrainian views, as well as those voicing opposition to President Vladimir Putin. That's where the infiltration comes in. And this is one of the things that's so crazy about this story. Not only is it terrifying that you have this chain of influence here, right? Even taking out Russia's influence on the Ukrainian agency, because most of the accounts targeted were what Ukraine would call, anti-Ukraine disinfo.
right,
But because of that infiltration, it makes it even more complicated than that. So not only do you have that sort of scary chain of influence, but then when you add to the fact that the Russians infiltrated this group, now you have anti-Russian talking points being censored, which is the opposite of what this Ukrainian agency would want. So not only does it speak to just an Orwellian state of censorship, but also, this was taken from Matt Taibbi's article that he put out about this. He said, this report shows yet again how easily mistakes are made in algorithmic speech policing. Here, for instance, the SBU, the Ukrainian agency, is asking for the takedown of an American who'd replied to an official in the faraway Russian region of Tuva. Here's the offending line. It strikes me as odd at this tragic time of international crisis initiated by Russia's invasion of a sovereign nation, Tuva's highest elected federal official has time to spend arguing with a foreigner trying to convince me that the Ukrainian government and their Jewish president are Nazis. As we saw with the Twitter files, Taibbi writes, the SBU censors were probably searching using keywords, Ukrainian, Nazis, and not bothering to read the content to check the context. So they end up censoring someone who's speaking out for them on their behalf, because the tech companies outsource the job of policing content to these AI algorithm robots. And so there's just a million angles from which you can look at this and say, wow, how fucked up. How fucked up that the censorship is going on in the first place, but also it just speaks to what idiots they are for believing, and by they, I mean the FBI, for believing that these tech companies give a fuck about anything. Tech companies don't give a shit about anything. They don't want to be bothered. That's why people start tech companies. They start tech companies so that they can make money from their PJs in their condo. So they don't have to deal with people or problems or anything. They want to be able to create this like set it and forget it app that just runs on its own, and they get payments in every week. That's all Zuckerberg cares about. It's all Dorsey cares about. To a, perhaps to a lesser extent, it's most of what Elon cares about. They don't want to be bothered with shit. And so, of course, they're not going to take the time to do it right. They're going to let a robot sniff out, oh, okay, well, we got it wrong. Oh, did we take down something from somebody who was saying what you wanted them to say, right? Sanctioned speech by the FBI. Oops, sorry, right? They don't care. So what a mess all the way around.
Well, okay, for one thing, let's plug our friend Matt Taibbi. That is, if you want to see the full article, his Racket Substack. I've been a subscriber pretty much since he started it.
Yeah, it's good.
It's really good. He has another article up where he's been trying to stay out of the Twitter files because of his falling out with the aforementioned God King of Twitter, Elon Musk there. But he just put out a bunch more Twitter files that he had from when he was working with them to help the prosecution in Missouri versus Biden. He's saying he's got a lot more evidence that shows this was clearly government collusion with these tech companies, and further, that the tech companies openly talked about their fear of regulation as the motivation for cooperating, right? Which what can be more dangerous to free speech than that? And in terms of whether they care, I don't agree with that. I mean, these guys definitely have their narcissistic God complex, and they see themselves as hacking society, right? They're coming up with hacks to change the world and make a different future built around the technologies that they're creating or stealing in many cases. But look, man, I mean, how many tweets go out a day? How else would you do it? How many YouTube videos are uploaded? You have to do it with AI, which goes back to, I mean, we just don't believe there should be censorship at all. Like maybe have AIs that flag, the N-word and things like that, and then have a moderator take a look.
Well, that's the thing. They don't invest in the human element. What comes after that appeal where, oh, you did this by accident, right? We hear all the time, social media companies, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, even the platform we're on now, even Uber. I had that mishap with my facial hair tripping off a selfie sensor. They don't invest in the human beings who actually go in and look at, okay, are these policies of ours being enforced fairly? They don't take that next step because they're fucking lazy. They want easy money. That's why they get into this game in the first place. So yeah, a lot of these guys have big egos. I don't think they have a political ideology. I don't think they're driven to help the FBI root out this information. Look what they had to do to Mark Zuckerberg to get him to police it in the first place. They had to drag him before Congress. During the 2016 election, he didn't want any of this shit. Get the fuck out of here. I'm going to start sniffing out the Trump people and taking down their shit. That's a waste of time. That's a waste of money in his mind.
Well, I was going to say, to the extent that these Silicon Valley guys have an ideology, they're libertarians.
Right.
Ultimately,
their ideology, they want to get the government off their ass. So they got to do what they have to do to keep them off their ass.
Well, they've got, And Elon is a classic Randian libertarian, right? It's the great entrepreneur who solves society's problems. Right? He can do it better. He's the Ubermensch. He can do it better than society can. And he's going to make it profitable. He's going to make a business out of it. And the government should stay off his back. So really, I mean, they're libertarians insofar as they have an ideology. Of course, they don't care what goes on their platforms. But they care about regulation. And that's been the implicit threat from the beginning. That's really what's allowed the government to intimidate these platforms into taking people down. You think this is where I agree with you. Is there anyone at YouTube who gave a fuck what Alex Jones said? I don't think so.
No, that's why they kept him on as long as they did. They made a lot of money off of him, right? Twitter too, Facebook too, right? They took action when they were forced to. Right. And so that's the part of this that the FBI didn't realize. Like, these guys are not actually your allies. They're just mercenaries. They're just doing what they have to do to keep the money coming in for themselves. They're not ideologically committed to whatever fucking shit you're trying to run.
Not the people at the top. I think if you look at the Twitter files, a lot of the libs who are working in the executive levels who were interacting with the FBI, I mean, they're clearly like.
Oh yeah, Yoel Roth. Yeah, he was definitely a believer. All right, let's take a few more super chats before we pack it in. Thank you guys for being here this morning. It was a great time. I like the morning shows. They're a lot of fun. I feel chipper. I feel rested, ready to go. Keeping me sane on a work day. Thanks, boys. Thank you, Skill. Indeed. In fact, I have to start my DoorDash shift soon, actually. I'm working today. DC, thanks for the $5. MK Ultra infects through every medium, from the stage to the screen and beyond. Shame that people are either completely oblivious or think the program ended. Interesting. Well, I'll have to explore that a little bit more. But that's an interesting.
I know a lot of these theater people personally. There's no MK Ultra
necessary for a lot of them.
Yes. dumb as a box of rocks.
Morning Joe Ultra, MJ Ultra. Yeah, exactly. That's what it goes for them. Dwayne Vogel, a member, thank you, says the theater was always what we call woke. Yeah, to a large extent, but it was real woke. It was that's what I was going to say. It's about a black family trying to move out to the suburbs, facing those challenges, right? Fences, same thing. Rents, very woke, but real high stakes, right? Not just monologues about personal experience with literally no story whatsoever. I mean, I went to a play festival. I mean, it's just that. It's therapy for the playwright. And, and oftentimes the playwright is not a member of these groups. They are a white person trying to build credibility with a certain outgroup to assuage their guilt for being where they are, right, in the world. So that's what I mean. But, yeah, I mean, you're right. There's always been an element of, like, radical politics, which you could call woke at a certain time, obviously.
But there was a big focus on poverty and class, and that's completely gone because you don't have theater artists from that background writing these plays. The people who are getting those opportunities, they might be of a diverse identity, but they're not from poverty. So the people who are picking what plays to produce, it's not their issue. They're not interested in it. They don't relate to it. It's, we're a long way from Clifford Odets and Miller. These guys were dealing with these kind of gritty street life portraits. These people don't know anything about that. But even by the time I was coming up, that was a problem. I remember I was sitting in like a playwright showcase that these Yale kids were doing, and some girl goes up trying to do some kind of New York lower class person that had been written by one of these Yale assholes, and literally they put the line in this girl's mouth. Yeah, I tried to read Faulkner, but I'm not too much upstairs, And that's when I got up and walked out. I literally got up and walked out. I wanted to fucking throw something.
Kuznetsky Bassane, thanks for the $4.99. Appreciate that very much. Thank you, folks, for your generosity. Like I said, these super chats are what make these shows possible, these additional streams. Ideator, thanks for the $5. This country, needs either an economic reset or a protective second economy, or it will fall. Yeah, more and more are falling through the cracks each year. That is indeed the case, my friend. Folks, thank you very much for being here this morning. We had a great time with you. Thanks for waking up. To our friends across the pond, thanks for carving out some time in the afternoon or the evening from wherever you are. We had people from Bali, people from Ireland tuning into the stream. That's the idea.
This is the international show.
The international show, exactly. So we had a great time with you all. You can go to patreon.com/DoDissidents and help support the show so we can do even more of these. But we will see you back here Sunday night, July 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern, at which point we will talk about the student debt relief. We'll talk about the troops going to Europe. A lot of news breaking late in the week this week, so we'll have a full show for you guys as we always do. On Sunday, we thank you very much for being here today. Until we meet again, be safe and be well.
Courage.
Please clap.